Welcome back, everybody. My name is Laughter, and today I'll be teaching you guys about letter names on treble clefs. But before we learn about the letter names on a treble clef, let us first start off with what letter names are. Letter names are referred to names that are given to notes. So in music, we have the 7 basic letter names, which is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. What I'm trying to tell you by this is in music, we only use the 7 basic letters of the alphabet. We do not use 26 letters of the alphabet, meaning that there is no H, there is no J, K, I until Z. We only use these 7 letters to name our notes in music. And there must always be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If we were to continue the sequence, however, we'll go back. If we continue to G, we'll go back to A again. So it's going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Because G is the last letter. Therefore, if you want to continue again, we start from the beginning. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. This is to say that there are only 7 basic letter names in music. We do not use 26 letters of the alphabet to write music. There are only 7 basic letter names. Now, these letter names indicate that they have different pitch or different sound. So for example, this A, letter name A, if you were to give it to the name of a note, that note will have a different pitch. However, if you're going to play a B note, it will give you a different pitch compared to A, and so as C, D, E, F, G. These also indicate the different types of pitch that are given to notes. Now, I'm going to show you by playing each note to show you how the pitch varies as I play each note on and on. Let us go there now. Now I'm going to show you how these letter names can vary given their different pitch. Firstly, I'm going to start with the letter A. This is how it will sound. Then we'll move on to B. Then we move on to C. Then we move on to D. Then we move on to E. Then we move on to F. Then we move on to G. So this shows you that these are not just names given to notes, but these names that are given to notes also indicate that they have different pitch. So as we saw that this A compared to the B had a higher pitch than A. And we saw here that this C had a higher pitch than B, D had a higher pitch than C, E had a higher pitch than E, D, and F had a higher pitch than E, and G had a higher pitch than F. What I mean by pitch is how high or how low a sound is, meaning that the sound of this B note, this B was higher than that of the A, and this one was higher than that of the B, and so on. So this is clearly to show you that there are different types of notes that we can have in music that can have different types of pitch as well. Not all notes have the same pitch. So these letter names are there to clarify that these notes can be different when it comes to pitch or sound. Now let us move on to letter names on clefs. Alright, now we are moving on to letter names on a treble clef. But before we go to that, I want to discuss what these pairs of lines that are drawn here mean. You have probably seen this in my video and wondering what these lines represent. Well, these pairs of lines drawn after the other are called staves. A stave is a set of 5 lines and 4 spaces used to write musical notes on. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines and 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. The spaces are here, these white parts here. Whereas you can see these lines that are drawn in black. These lines are called bar lines. They are a placement of where notes are written indicating their pitch. There are different types of pitch. So if you see a note drawn on this first line, for example, it has a different pitch compared to these other 4 lines. And each of these lines have different types of pitch. So as the spaces. The spaces are also used to write musical notes on, and the spaces also have their different types of pitch. Now let us note that this bottom line is the first line, it's the first bar line on a stave. This second one is this line is the second line on the stave. This one is the third line on the stave, this one is the fourth line on the stave, and this one is the fifth line on the stave. Now let us move on to the clef, which is known as a treble clef. But firstly, a clef is a symbol that indicates the range of a pitch on a stave. And the example we have here of a clef is called a treble clef. A treble clef a treble clef is a symbol that represents that the pitch is high. It indicates that the pitch of the music or a song is high. So whenever you see here, you come across a stave and you see a symbol of this symbol, which is called a treble clef, you should know that the music or the note written on the stave is high. So mean the pitch is gonna sound high. But however, let's note that this is not the only clef that we find in music. There are many types of clefs. But in this video, I'll only be teaching you about letter names on a treble clef and how to write them. Now you're probably wondering how we write notes or how we can identify notes on a stave. So there are notes that are found on the lines of a stave, and there are notes that are found on the space of a stave. However, we should know that the notes found on the line on the stave are different compared to the notes found on the spaces of the stave. But I have a format on how to help you to indicate the notes that are found on the lines. So I have this phrase here, which is every good boy does fine, right? And I'm going to circle these letters here, which are the letter names, and they are given to notes which are found on the lines only. This is E, the letter name E, letter name G, letter name B, letter name D, and letter name F. Remember I told you that letter names are names given to notes. So if you give a note the name E, this note E is going to be this note E, this note G, note B, note D, note F are only found on the lines of a treble clef. As I have written here, you can see that the letter name E is found on the first line, meaning this bottom line here is where you find your E note. And you can see G, which is found on the second line, meaning it's found on this line here, which is on the stave. Then you see your note B found on the third line. Therefore, this is going to be your note B will be located here on this third line. And you can see here D, which is found on the fourth line. Therefore, you can find your note D on the fourth line of the stave. And you can see F, which is located on the fifth line. Therefore, you can find your note F on the fifth line of the stave. However, this phrase only applies to the treble clef. So if you want to write notes on a treble clef, you need to remember this phrase, every good boy does fine. This is the phrase you can use, or you can use another phrase like every good boy deserves fruit or every good boy deserves favor. But I prefer you use every good boy does fine. Anyone, you can make up any phrase you want to remember it. But it must always be in the sequence E, G, B, D, F, right? So let us move on to how to identify notes on the lines of the stave of a treble in a treble clef. Right? Remember, I told you that this phrase applies to the treble clef only. So let us start off with E. E is found on the first line. So we can use a semi-brief, or you can use a note, or you can use a crotchet, a minim, whichever note you feel like to identify you can use. But I feel like it's best to use a semi-brief because it saves time. So we said that the E is found on the first line, right? Therefore, use a semi-brief. You notate it on the first line. Remember what we are dealing with the lines first, so your note must be drawn on the line, right? Then we move on to G, which is located on the second line. Therefore, you draw semi-brief on the second line. Therefore, this is a G note. Now we know this is the note E and this is the note G on a treble clef. Then we move on to the third one, which is B. It's located on the third line. Therefore, you draw your semi-brief on the third line. Therefore, this is your note B. This is a B note. We move on to the fourth one, which is D does, which is located on the fourth line. You draw your note here. This is your D note. Remember, we're dealing with the lines first, so you must draw your semi-briefs correctly, or whichever note you prefer to use correctly on the line to indicate that these notes are found on the line. Then we move on to the F, which is located on the fifth line. You draw F note there. And now we have our notes. This is going to be E, G, B, D, and F. That is how we find it. And also, before indicating your notes, we need to learn this phrase, every good boy does fine. It needs to be in your head. So you write it here, E for every on the bottom line, which is the first line, G for good, the second line, B for boy, the third line, does for D for does on the fourth line, and F for fine on the fifth line. That is how you remember this, and you will never get confused. Now let us move on to the species of the treble clef. Now what I said, always write before notating, trying to indicate which notes are found in the species or the lines. Always write every good boy does fine. And always remember, E is found on the first line, G second, B third, D fourth, F fifth. This only applies on the treble clef. Remember that. Now we know that this line is on. You know that E is on the line, so therefore you move in alphabetical order. The letter that comes after E is F. Therefore, F is going to be found on the space. Remember, E, F, alphabetical order. We know that the note found on this line is G. Alphabetical order in music, remember there is no H. Therefore, it goes back to the A. So it's going to be G, then A. Then your A is found here on the space. Remember, draw your lines on the space correctly when dealing with spaces, and on the lines when dealing with lines. Move on here. You know that this line here is B. Move alphabetical order to find the note here on this space. The letter after P is C. You draw your semi-brief there. Then move on to this one, the fourth line, which is D. Alphabetical order. The note after D is E. So the letter in this space is E. Same here, the fifth line, we have F here. You want to know what is on the space here. You count it out, you move in alphabetical order. The letter after F is G. You draw your G note here. Now let us write our notes. We have F, we have A, we have C, we have E, and we have G. Now that is how you identify notes on a treble clef on both lines and spaces. Now I hope this video was very helpful. Please share this video with others who feel like they want to learn music, or for those who are in school, or those who just want to begin with music, learn how to write their musical notes. And I'm glad you made it to the video. Please hope to subscribe this video, and thank you. See you later.